I've lost hair and I've gotten gray hair over this thing. But as you can see, we're back on the 66. Now, I've already done a few things off camera, and I'll be honest with you, I accidentally twisted the key too far into the crank position, and to my surprise, this thing fired up first go. I couldn't even stop it. I accidentally bumped it, and you know how the computer just wants it to start. And it immediately fired right up and just blew my mind. And it also ended up dumping a bunch of transmission fluid all over the floor, because I didn't have the coolant hoses bypassed. They were just kind of open, so it dumped about a half gallon, or I'm sorry, a half a quart of fluid of trans oil onto the floor. So it was an accident, but I was elated to see that it actually fired right up. So in this episode, you're going to get to see that. There's a bunch of stuff we got to button up. We got to work on the radiator. We've got some stuff to button up with the power steering fluid. We've got the AC compressor, a bunch of hoses and doodads and gizmos and things like that we got to button up. So I'm going to fire you guys up on the time lapse and fly you guys in and show you how I do some of those things with making hoses, those type of things. And then we'll get back in here. We're going to put a steering wheel in this thing, the seat back in it, and measure for a drive shaft. So should be a good episode. Okay, new development. So if you look back there, you see those two hoses coming from the back of the engine. Well, those are the coolant circulation that goes to the top of the heads, but also routes through the heater core. And I had temporarily just kind of tucked them out of the way and got them down here. And with the vintage air system, there's a very specific in and an out with a valve that gets installed with the vintage air system, which was already in the car before it got to me. So the customer previously had that installed, and it's a good system. So I'm now tapping into it with the Gen 3 Hemi. And here, penetrating through the inner fender right here, are two hard lines that are stubbed up right here that are made to go from the whatever engine you've got installed. Well, I actually had these installed backwards. I did some research, and it's a little different from Ford. Let me go up here and see if I can drive this camera here. I've got one of the gimbal cameras. So the driver's side port is taller than the one on the passenger side. You can see both of those hoses there. The driver's side is the one going to the heater core, so it goes to the inlet of the heater core. It goes through the heater core and back out, and then travels back into the passenger side port on the engine. So right now I actually have these flipped where the passenger side is going to the inlet and it's coming back on the driver's side. So I'm gonna actually flip it right here. So I'm just gonna flip these two hoses like this versus rerouting everything. So I think if I just flip those two hoses, you know, this one will go here and that one will go here essentially. So that should fix it. So let's get that done. All right, I got this really cool intake kit that I'm going to be installing here, and you can see this. It's called this Momentum GT AFE power. So here's the box, but the box really isn't going to be fitting, but this is meant for a Dodge Challenger with the shaker hood and everything. But we're going to see if we can get it to fit down in here. I'm going to have to hack the hell out of this thing. There's some more pieces right here. So you got this little rubber thing here. We've got to get the MAF sensor to fit inside here as well. They give you a little rubber grommet that fits inside there. Then your MAF sensor fits inside there. It's, I don't know, it looks like a pretty simple kit. It was a little pricey. I actually got this inside Summit Racing at the Atlanta location, and it was on the clearance aisle. So it was an open package, and I saved a couple $100 on this, knowing I was going to cut the crap out of it to get it fit in here. So let's see if we can customize custom parts any further. So I'm going to put you on time lapse while I install this. Well, this thing showed up on my front porch today. This is a 4-core radiator that's meant to work with the 66B bodies, and it's got these aluminum wings on it that are already pre-welded on, and it's just a direct kind of bolt-in radiator, like I said, that's just meant for the B bodies for a V8, right? So it wasn't really meant for a 6.4 Hemi. But the good thing is that the 6.4 Hemis tend to run pretty cool, around 190 degrees. And well, the original motors that, you know, the 392 that was in this ran about that same temperature as well. So we're going to be running a different type of coolant. It'll be flowing at different rates and stuff like that. But I've used these in the past from the company Alloy Works, where I got this radiator at. And I've used them several times. They're very economical, very inexpensive to purchase. I think this one right here, I spent like 200 to 300 bucks or something like that for this radiator, where you can go to Cold Case or some of these other radiator manufacturers and pay $1,500, $2,000 for a radiator that, in my opinion, the functionality of these radiators are so simple that I don't really see the value that you're getting unless you're doing a really high-end SEMA build. I don't really see the value that you're getting in a $2,000 radiator. Maybe it's there somewhere, but I've been just fine with the $200 to $300 drop-in radiators. Now, this one I made sure to get a 4-core radiator because we are doing air conditioning, right? So we need higher capacity. These are basic cooling fans, but I did get dual cooling fans here. So it should work fine. And you know, worst case, if there are issues, I've got other radiators laying around. I don't know if you can see it if it's out of camera view, but right here, I tried to see if this one would work, but this one was for an F100 bump side, but it doesn't quite fit. So I ended up buying this one, and it showed up after just a few days. I think I bought this thing like 3 days ago online, and it was surprisingly on my doorstep today, the day after Halloween. So we've got a few things to do to prep this. We're going to be doing, oh, and one of the other reasons why I got the 4-core is because I'm not doing a separate Durali trans cooler. And most of my builds, like definitely with Coyote swaps, I always do a separate 2-core small Durali cooler for the transmission. For this 8 HP, because the lines were already ran and they're already nicely ran along the motor and they're stubbed up kind of right in the front of the motor, it makes sense to just use the onboard trans cooler. And if there's issues with it, if I run into problems, I can easily install a Durali if I need to, but I'll run it like this for now until I need to change it, right? Couple of things. This was meant for the 392 motor. So you got the lower hose. I think that's 1.5 inches, and then you got 1.25 inches up here. Both of the hoses from the motor are going to be on the left side. So I got to do something to 90 over and 90 over. And I got to do some wacky stuff here with the hoses. I got to tap in some brass ports right here on the bottom for the trans cooler lines. I may do 6AN and use AN hose and tap that into the existing hard lines that are there now. I don't know. We'll see how all that goes. And then of course we got to wire up the we got to wire up the fans too. The wiring for that was already included in the Sublime control pack that they sell that's in this car. So, and it's actually set up with dual relays on board. So you've got a low and a high setting. So there's 2 wires there for that. And I actually called, I think it's Blake over there at Sublime. Really awesome guy, answered all my questions for me. Yeah, he said that there's 2 wires. One is for low fan and the second one is for high. So one is for one fan and then the second fan together. They'll both run at the same time. I like to run both fans at the same time because we've got a lot of cooling to do, right? So we've got trans cooling, we've got an AC condenser in there, and then we've also got the radiator itself. So we're going to make sure both fans kick on at the same time, and I'm just going to wire both of those 2 leads together to run them both at the same time. So let's go ahead and get this thing hung. Let's see how well that works. All right, so I've made a decision. I've decided I'm actually not going to use this radiator. I'm actually going to install a Durali transmission cooler, and there's a couple reasons why. The first one, the 8HP70 transmission, the trans cooler lines, the diameter are a lot bigger than these right here, which means that the volume of fluid that it's cooling needs to be greater than what this radiator can handle, because the core inside of this, I think this looks like 1/4 inch or smaller, where the diameter of the lines coming from the transmission are 3/8. So it's a lot bigger, it's a lot more volume, and I don't want this to restrict the flow rate that is required for the transmission. So I'm just going to plug these off, not use the radiator core to cool the transmission. We'll install a Durali trans cooler. But all right, so you can see what I decided here. So you see we're actually going to mount the Durali heater or the cooler right up in here. I have the horn mounted there right now. I'll move that to the other side of the car or the other fender well, and then mount the Durali heater right against that wall right there. So it should be out of the way. It's up toward the front of the car, shouldn't be an issue. Oh, let's see how well this thing fits down in there. And just like that, we've got a full radiator install, and it turned out really, really good. And look at all that room we got there. We've got a good 5-6 inches between the motor and the radiator. Enough room that if we ever wanted to put an intercooler and a supercharger on this thing, we could. There's room for it. All right, next thing we need to work on is hoses, but I don't have any hose material here, so I got to go shopping. So we'll do that later. And now we can look at doing a quick test to make sure those fans fire up. Let's do that real quick. All right, so the way I normally like to do stuff like this is I like to switch ground. You can see, I don't know if you can see this or not, I installed a relay here. You probably saw it in the time lapse. All right, let's go ahead and simulate firing this thing up. So obviously we don't have exhaust on this thing yet, so I can't just get it up to temp and see if the fan is going to turn on by the computer. We have a pretty high likelihood that that signal is going to happen. But what I'm going to do is just simulate it. The way I do this is I've run a 40 amp fuse and direct power right to both the fans. I spliced these together on one circuit. And then I've got an inline fuse down here. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a fuse there. And then what I do is I use the relay to switch ground, right? So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is trigger the relay so that the relay sends ground to the fans and the fans should turn on. So let's do that. And I'm using my fancy dancy power probe right here. I'm going to push down and send ground to the fans. I'm sorry. I'm going to use 12 volts and trigger and actually close the relay so that the relay sends ground to the fans. All right, where would I want to do that at? Where's that thing? Oh, right here. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and poke this wire. This is the wire coming from the computer. And I am not sending ground for some reason. Oh, I don't have the power to the car turned on. That would probably do it. Let's go back here. All right, now that we've got juice flowing up to the front of the car, it should work this time. I feel like, sometimes I feel like quite the village idiot. So let me poke this wire again. I'm gonna use the same hole I had. Well, oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, that's why. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but those fans fired up. All right. So let me do that one more time so you guys can see it. Yeah, we got strong flow going. Those fans are kicking butt. All right, I guess I'm happy with that. The fans fired up and they're super strong. We're gonna get a lot of really good airflow through these fans, and so that's exciting. I spent a little longer than what I wanted to spend working on these fans, but in my defense, I have never done a B-body car before, so I was kind of taking my time and making sure I got all this stuff right. So, but we did get it done. We fired it up and it worked first time. So good news. What's next? We need to work on getting some radiator hoses installed. And then once we do that, we can fill the radiator, but we can't really run the system and burp it and get all the air out until we get exhaust put on this thing. Well, we can't get exhaust put on this thing until we get a drive shaft put on. My exhaust guy requires that he's able to drive it in onto the rack to put exhaust on it. So I got to get a drive shaft ordered. I'm going to show you how to measure your drive shaft when you measure for a drive shaft when you're doing custom builds like this. But that is going to be the next step, is getting the measurements and then going online and actually ordering the custom length drive shaft. So let's get into it. All right. So next we've got to measure to understand what size U-joint we need, right? And so in order to to spec a drive shaft, the drive shaft is going to come complete with the U-joints assembled on the drive shaft, and it's going to be cut to length. So essentially all we have to do is crawl under the vehicle and just set the drive shaft in place and put these install the C-clips and bolt it up essentially. So we have to spec, or we have to tell them exactly what size we're going to need, and we do that using a micrometer here and then a little cheat sheet chart. So based on a quick internet search, this car really should have a 7260 or a 7290 size U-joint. And that was really the two most common ones used in the 60s on these type of vehicles. But to measure, to find out, you're going to take and measure from the inside of your caps here, from this face to this face right here. That's the first measurement. And then the second measurement is going to be from the width of the caps. So it's going to be right at this ridge, the inside of this ridge here to the inside of this ridge here. So let's get this measurement real quick, and I'll try to do this to where you can kind of see what I'm doing here. All right, so I got the first one, and it's 2.116, and the next one is going to be 1.068. All right, let's compare that to the chart. All right, so there's a couple different U-joint types. We're going to be looking at the one that there's ones with tabs and then there's one without tabs. So we're obviously the ones without tabs. And if you saw that I measured in between these two cups right here, and we got our measurement for that, and it was close to this 2.125, this 2.25. And then we also measured the actual cup width itself, right? And so that was closest to this one right here in the center of 1.078 inches. So that means we have a 7260 size U-joint that we're going to be using. All right, so what you're looking at is the back of the transmission, and I use my foot because I'm staying up here, but you see this coupler right here. This is the stock coupler that comes in the 2020 Dodge Challenger. Well, that's not really going to work very well because we need a standard U-joint style of coupler there. And so then you get these guys right here, and that's kind of what we want up there. So there is a intermediate piece that you can buy, which I've already purchased, that will mount, it'll change over from that style coupler that it will allow me to mount up one of these U-joint style couplers on there. And so when I order the drive shaft, I'll order it to where it's going to come with this and the U-joint already attached for that end. So I don't have it here yet, but I do know that it is 3/8 of an inch thick. So I'm going to, when I measure this, I'm going to measure out from 3/8 of an inch and start from there and pull my tape measure back toward the drive shaft, or back toward the rear end. To get our measurements, we need an endless length from the face of this right here. So either here, 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 or here. I normally like to pick the bottom one, and then, I'll, on the other end, on the back of the transmission, I'll measure toward the bottom of that as well. But we need a exact measurement from the face of this to the face of the back of the transmission coupler as well. So the best way that I've found to do that is to actually use a magnet to hold my tape measure there. So let me move you out of the way and get my tape measure all mounted up in there, and then I will pull the measurement and see where we're at. All right, so from face to face, what we've got here is 62 inches exactly. It just landed exactly on 62 inches, right where I need it. So we'll take that measurement and go plug it in the computer and get the drive shaft ordered. There is a bunch of different places you can go to get a drive shaft made online. And what's really cool nowadays is you don't have to go down to your local machine shop and bring them parts and pieces of miscellaneous drive shafts and have them fabricate something up to you. So if you look at, I could have ordered from Tom Woods, I could have ordered from PST, and the reason why I'm selecting full torque
in this instance, it's because they happen to have online here a 8HP70 swap aluminum drive shaft. So it is already set up on the output end of the transmission to mount directly to the flange of an 8HP70. And it already understands the horsepower that it's going to be putting on, the potential, the RPM, and so on. And so it knows that it's going to need a 3.5 inch drive shaft, and it needs to be aluminum. Awesome. So all I have to do is select in the drop-down list here whatever the rear end flange is going to be. In our case, we already measured it and determined it's going to be a 7260. And then we have to give our overall length. So in our case, it's 62.5 inches. I plug this in here, add to cart, purchase it. They are a little pricey. Now they do steel drive shafts and stuff. Those are a lot cheaper. You can get basic drive shafts for around $300 to $500, $600. But obviously the higher the horsepower, the higher the RPM and torque, the more expensive this stuff is going to get. And you start to get into aluminum drive shafts and wall thickness increases, and yeah, it can get pricey. But in our case, we're looking at about $1,300. And once I click submit here and pay for this, I can expect that in the last few times I've ordered from Full Torque drive shafts, it's been sitting on my doorstep in under a week.
You know, if there's one thing I hate the most about doing these Restomods, is actually putting the hood back on. It's the biggest pain in the butt in my opinion. But we're at a really cool point right now. We're ready to actually fire this thing up and test it. But first, let me give you a quick walk around. I want to take you through some of the cool stuff we've been doing on this thing. Here, let me fly you in here. So as you can see, I got it back on its feet now, and look at the ride height with that QA1 front suspension. I haven't made any adjustments yet, and if you really look at it closely, you can visibly see how bad that camber is out. We've got to get this thing over to an alignment shop quickly. But before we do that, we got all kinds of stuff we got to do. We got exhaust we got to put on. I've got to make a bracket to mount that PCM. As you can see, I kind of just got it balancing and laying it in there. We've got a bunch of cable management left to do. And as you can see, we've still got a few things like the AC lines and connectors and gizmos and doodads and things like that we've got to button up. And if you notice here, I did make a little bit of a modification here to the air intake. And if you remember from previous videos or earlier in this video, I had this large blue air intake on there. Well, unfortunately that thing was not going to work. Here, let me show you. So if you see this, I mean, obviously that would have been preferable. It's a much, much better air intake. And it also has the crankcase vent tube built into it as well. But the problem here was that it came over way too far, and it was actually hitting right here, and I would not have been able to shut the hood. So what I had to end up doing is going over to whatever it was, Napa or AutoZone or something like that, and I picked up one of these cheap Spectre air intakes, and I'm making use of the original intake sleeve here with the MAF sensor as well. And I've got a little crankcase breather down there. I'm not sure if you can see it or not. Right down there, it was one of the little crankcase breathers they had on the wall in there. So that's just kind of got its own filter and it's open to atmosphere. But that's going to work out just fine for us. If my customer wants to do something different with the air intake and make a custom box, obviously we can talk about that. Brake lines are all finished up. I've tested them, bled them very well, no issues there. And if you look over here I have finished up some temporary radiator hoses, the upper and the lower. This was a little tricky, kind of similar to when I do my Coyote swaps. The radiator itself is 1.5 inches. Yet coming out of the motor, it's 1 3/4. So I had to do one of these little step downs from 1 3/4 to 1.5 inches. But that seemed to work out pretty well. And then down here on the bottom, if you can see it down there, that was kind of a pain because the outlet is over here on this side, on the passenger side. But for the radiator, it's down here on the driver's side. So I had to make up a long hose that 90s down, 90s over, 90s forward, but it's gonna work fine. Steering linkage is back in. It all looks fantastic. Now we do still have to install the Durali transmission cooler, and then as you can see down here, maybe if I can point you down there, you see those caps, that's the AC compressor, so we still have to get those lines installed. But I don't do the AC until literally the day I'm about to hand the car back to the customer, because you know, if you ever have to take anything apart and you've got to break that open, it's just a total pain in the butt. So I wait till the very end to change that out. All right, what else? Let's just finish walking around here. It does need a bath. I'll probably blast it off with the water hose when I pull it outside. And if you look inside here, we've got the steering column installed. I ended up reinstalling the seat and cleaning it up a little bit inside here. And that's just kind of one of those eBay steering wheels. It should work for now. I've got the turn signals and the tilt and all that stuff is installed. Nice positive feel and very solid. I do have the horn wired in. All of that stuff is functional and working very, very well. And if you notice here, we're still missing Dakota Digital gauges, but that will come in the next month or two. We're gonna end up pulling this thing out and parking it for a while, which I'll explain later. But let's actually fire this thing up and hear it run, finally. I actually had to open the trunk with the keys and turn the power back on. So now that I've done that, let's get in and fire it up. If you heard that noise, that's the electric fuel pump priming. That's a good sign. Woo! Did you hear the sound of thunder? That is super exciting and very, very fulfilling that we did all this work all in under, really the amount of hours I got in this thing is, I got maybe 3 or 4 weeks of actual working on it. Not bad. And in all, we really didn't run into too many issues or gotchas on this entire install. And if I'm being honest, this was my first hemiswap I've ever done. So I'm pretty pleased with how it's turned out. We are super close to having this thing drive under its own power, and we've only got a few things left to do. We've got to get exhaust put on it. It needs to go to the alignment shop, and we're probably going to do that in one trip because I don't like towing it one place and bringing it back and towing it to another place. So we got to get a tow truck to drive this over to the exhaust shop, then from there the alignment shop and back again. Then we can do things like burp the coolant system, let it get up to temperature, and start driving it around the neighborhood and seeing what faults we have, wiring and things like that. And remember, we've still got to put the drive shaft in this thing. That's got to happen before I even get it on our trailer to take it over to get the exhaust put on. My exhaust guy will not accept a vehicle unless it is drivable, where you can drive it in on the racks, and I don't blame him. That's not a bad requirement to have. So what's next for this thing? Well, there's not a lot we can do with it right now. We're waiting on some of those parts. We're still waiting on Dakota Digital gauges, so we're gonna be pulling this thing out of here and parking it outside. It'll be a few weeks before we get back on it. And I promise I'll film all this stuff with putting the drive shaft back in, doing the exhaust, and of course, there's gonna be an epic burnout video once we get this thing wrapped up and we hand the keys back over to the owner. But like I said, for now, this thing is going to go outside, and I'm very excited to get this 69 F100 pulled in here. That one's going to be super fun, right? Remember, we're going to be doing the Crown Vic swap on it and using the Range Industries kit. Thank you to Range Industries for sponsoring that upcoming video. But that's going to be it for this episode. Listen, work safe in your garage, and I really look forward to seeing all of you guys next weekend.